What I've said before, I say again. Do not dismiss anything because it is religious or irreligious. Dismiss something on the basis of whether it is tenable and justifiable, on the basis of the argument of reason or not.
Is it fair for an elected official to let their religious beliefs influence their legal decisions? Isn't that imposing your religion on the entire country? Well, that's one of two questions you'll hear answered today as we return to the University of Washington for a Q&A with author and apologist Ravi Zacharias. Welcome back to Just Thinking. Today we're listening to part 2 of Ravi Zacharias' Q&A session at the University of Washington. As you may remember from part 1 last week, there were some questions that had to do with the place of religion in social issues and current events. We're going to hear another question along those lines today. But first, what is the relationship between postmodernism and the Christian worldview? Do they have to be at odds? Here's our first questioner.
Do you see any consistency between postmodern thought and the biblical Christian worldview, or is there any sense or any level in which those two things could be consistent?
Okay. Do you see anything in consistency between postmodern thought and the biblical worldview? First, let's define postmodernism. It's a lot, but in one line, it'll say this: no truth, no meaning, no certainty. That's postmodernity for you. No truth, no meaning, no certainty. Number 2, the denigration of propositional truth. That language is not at the command of the author, the interpretation is at the command of the reader. Now you take no truth, no meaning, no certainty, and that the objective truth of the writer is gone. What's left of the Bible? What's left of Christianity? So there is no common ground in their epistemology, the base from which they come to truth. But I'll tell you what postmodernism has done very positively for us. Postmodernism still reminds us of two very important things in life. Number one, the story. There is a story that people love to hear. You know, India has, as somebody has said, India never went from ancient to modern to postmodern. India went from ancient to postmodern. We bypassed the modern stage. We just leapfrogged over it. And what it is for India and Eastern cultures, the story is big. The story is big. Story of your life, the story of my life, the narrative, the parables, the metaphors and all are very, very important. You know, one of the things we have to admire the Muslim world for, they will guard their propositional truth. They will guard their propositional truth because they believe that the words are very important. Postmodernism doesn't give that any respect. It's the humiliation of the word in postmodernity. So the first thing, though, it gives us is the place of the story. The second thing is the importance of the community. And here I think the church has got a lot to learn. The church sometimes has become ruggedly individualistic and forgotten the community. In fact, those who are hurting or those who have blown it or those who have made mistakes, we are the first one to pounce on them and pulverize them and pummel them into the ground, when we should be the ones waiting for them to come in and so that we can help them in their need. So postmodernism has given me two important reminders: the place of the story and the place of the community, and the gospel story which is told. And that's why I think Mel Gibson did a marvelous job. And by the way, even in Muslim countries, they went to watch the story of the Passion by the tens of millions, whether it was Dubai or Abu Dhabi or whether you were in Delhi or Madras and whatever, they were thronging the theaters. They wanted to understand the story of the cross. And I think that is a reminder. When we do preaching, if we only do it at a cerebral level and just at a level of logic and reason, without the story, it will always come unhinged and unmoored. I think when you look at the books that are selling, the movies that are going, whether it's Tolkien's series or now with C.S. Lewis, people love the story and they love the fantastic. And the Bible has a lot of the fantastic, and the Bible is fantastically true. And the gospel is the story of the life and death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So postmodernism in its underlying premises is flawed, but in some of its applications has something to teach us. Thank you. Yes, sir.
just as a general observation that not politicizing religion, what would be reasons why not doing so would be almost synonymous with secularization. But more specifically, I actually had a more specific question than that.
Okay.
And more specific question concerns the role of religion in informing state policy. Given that we live in a society with religious pluralism, as you say, where there's deep and irreconcilable disagreement concerning the good and the truth, what are your thoughts on the permissibility of religious justification for the use of coercive state powers in the law, where such justifications may not be reasonably accepted by all those who are affected by such laws?
Fair enough. And, if these questions had simple answers, we wouldn't be battling it out at the highest levels of academy and politics and so on. But when you think about it, all politics is ultimately law. All law is ultimately based on one's moral worldview. And one's moral worldview ultimately is based on a belief in either absolutes or relativists. And the only difference between the secularists and, say, the religionists is that the secularist wants to be autonomous and the religionist attributes his or her belief to a religious worldview. And so when you come into the marketplace where these ideas have tension, somebody I know in the ministry was asked a question on certain forms of sexual behavior, and his answer was, no matter what answer I give is going to hurt somebody, so I'm not going to give any answer. Well, that answer itself may hurt somebody. So what are you going to do? Is sit under a tree and wiggle one's finger and not deal with it because it's going to hurt somebody? What I've said before, I say again. Do not dismiss anything because it is religious or irreligious. Dismiss something on the basis of whether it is tenable and justifiable, on the basis of the argument of reason or not. If, for example, the reason say, if I believe life is sacred, even in the mother's womb, then you will expect me to argue for the protection of that life. But if somebody else believes that it is not sacred in the mother's womb, then I will expect them to argue on the desacralization assignment to that life and will expect to dialogue back and forth. The important question I would have to that individual is, what is the basis of your sacralizing or desacralizing an individual life? What is your basis of sacralizing or desacralizing sexuality? Why is a thing that is not religious more admissible when it is based on a view on religion itself? Atheism is not in a vacuum. It is not value-free. Atheism is value-laden. It believes in the autonomy of an individual choice. So we have to test those in the marketplace of ideas. Every human being has a right to voice his or her opinion on these matters. And in the kind of democracy in which we live, why should one be blocked out? The voting is going to take place on the basis of a persuasion that a person has, whether it's religion or irreligion. And in this democracy, we go to the polls. Why should we say that a man is ipso facto dismissed because he is religious? On what basis would you do that? On the basis of the absolute value of human life, Mahatma Gandhi fought for the underprivileged. On the basis of the absolute value of race, Martin Luther King fought against the racist issue. He was a religious man. He believed every human being was created equal. Were you going to dismiss him because it was a religious belief?
You want me to respond? Well, I don't think the dichotomy is really between religion and non-religion. I think probably a better description between something defined as a comprehensive view. Yeah, I could appeal to utilitarianism. It sounds like you're appealing to John Stuart Mill when you say, free market of ideas and whatnot. But that itself would be a comprehensive view. I'm not saying that we should exclude this nonsense.
And I'm very happy to debate utilitarianism either. I feel it is ultimately untenable. Because in a republic, utilitarianism ultimately seeks for the maximum good for the maximum number of people. But in this culture, we also give the minorities privilege. So if utilitarianism had 10 people and 8 of them were one color and 2 of the lesser color and served 8 and did not serve 2, where would you go with it? So the utilitarian, let me say this and then I'll move to the next one. The problem we move to with ethics is this. We seem to think that once we move God out of the picture, then we've got a self-evident ethical system. It is just not there. There are 7 different kinds of ethical values that the humanists put to us, ranging from Joseph Fletcher's situation ethics to Ayn Rand's virtue of selfishness and egocentrism and so on. Immanuel Kant tried to believe that there was a self-evident ethic, mighty, turn your back upon God and you don't need Christ and you will arrive at an ethic all your own. And as Iris Murdoch of Oxford said, long before Kant we already had his incarnation. His name was Lucifer. And so the idea of, but I buy half of your statement that a comprehensive worldview can be justified or can be countered. And I think the Christian worldview is a comprehensive worldview. And I'll tell you why. Because it answers the 4 questions with the greatest degree of consistency of any worldview. The question of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. And when you take the 2 tests for truth, correspondence, and coherence, where each question is answered to correspond with reality, and all 4 questions are coherently answered, then you've got a worldview. That's what a worldview is, that has correspondence to reality and coherence in all of its answers. And I believe that the Christian worldview is, in my way of thinking, the most consistent and coherent worldview that is, from origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. And in the marketplace of ideas, we ought to be able to present it. And I think the problem is that it is shut off, it is extinguished, it is cut away, and we live under this illusion of neutrality, that the secularist is objective and the religionist is prejudiced. And I don't believe those deductions are true at all. But I've expanded more on this in my book, Deliver Us from Evil, and I think you might be willing to pursue. Your question is an important one. But the point I'm making is this: if the worldview is comprehensive and is coherent, it should be given a fair place in the market of ideas. Otherwise, what happens, any stigma can lick a good dogma. And what happens in the press, the Christian is stigmatized, and that his dogma is invalid, and that is absolute rubbish. It's just not true.